Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're going to be talking about the Seattle Seahawks 2024 NFL Draft Class based on data. So we're going to look at production, athleticism, and other statistical factors to determine how well the Seattle Seahawks did. A lot of the data work that I do is based on quantitative data analysis. So I'm taking decades worth of information and getting the most pertinent information, the stuff that has the most correlations, to give you the grades that you need. Now, if you want to learn more about my grading process, be sure to check out my top 50 prospects video. That video is in the link in the description where I go over all the correlations and everything and why data matters at various positions. But with all this stuff out of the way, let's get into the video. So stay tuned, of course, to the end of the video where I do a final grade on them. But the needs for the Seahawks is right here, and the needs is based on how the prospects have actually performed. So NFL Positional AV deals with how they actually have performed, and the data grade, or the EAV score, or expected approximate value score, as I call it, is on the right-hand side. So essentially, this is how they tested coming out, and the left side is how they tested in terms of NFL outcomes, in terms of starting and those other sort of things. Now, approximate value data is data that I get from Pro Football Reference. If you learn more about that, you can go to their site. But this is kind of how the Seahawks are doing right now in terms of their data. In terms of offensive needs, I would say one of the biggest needs that the Seahawks have on offense, which I think they might have addressed, is at the quarterback position. Geno Smith is definitely a very serviceable starter. And has a lot of things that are interesting in terms of him. But Sam Howell might be the future there just because he's a younger prospect and has similar upside potential to a guy like Geno Smith. So again, no offense to Geno Smith at all. It's just that he's older. His career passing efficiency. I mean, a lot of the stuff that he's been doing is very similar to say like a Ryan Tannehill in terms of like a career resurgence, but he's not exactly going to be the future there. They have to get another quarterback, and that might be Sam Howell. So I think this need has been addressed. Offensive line is another need that was identified as sort of a, something you could get better there. Tight end, wide receiver, and running back. Maybe not so much. Maybe tight end, but maybe not so much when you look at the overall data. But the defensive side of the football, this is the biggest need for them. Edge rusher, definitely. They're ranked 21 out of 32 teams in terms of the edge rusher position. Defensive tackle, definitely. Linebacker and safety are, again, all the other big needs. So the biggest needs for the Seahawks is really on the defensive side of the football versus the offensive side of the football. So I would expect a defensive heavy draft for them based on their needs assessment. So when we get to the actual picks, so starting with pick 16 for Byron Murphy, the second defensive tackle out of Texas, his data grade or his ceiling grade is 76.98. So when you take all of his data, his production, athleticism, age, other statistical factors, put them all together and compare it to past prospects, he gets a 76.98 score. His projected floor grade, which is the average AV of prospects taken where he was taken at with a similar data grade, is 72.04, and a balance grade of 74.51, which kind of marries his ceiling with his floor. His pick AV is 91.89, so what's expected out of a 16 pick is 91.89, and his overall grade would be a C. Based on the data work that I do, this would be considered a reach. Now, the reasons why, again, before you start stoning my channel, okay, guys, just hold on a second, okay? Let's get to why the data doesn't like Byron Murphy. There are some positives here, but let's get to why the data doesn't like him. So the first issue with him comes down to his market share production data. So Byron Murphy has above average sack data, above average TFL data, but below average solo tackle data. And when you look at the All-Pro averages, the Pro Bowl averages, and the starter averages at the position, most starters, all the way back since the 1989 NFL draft class, had above average solo tackle data, above average sack, and above average TFL data. This puts Byron Murphy in a situation where he would have to essentially become an outlier to really outperform these expectations. I mean, he is a first round pick. He's going to be given an opportunity to start. I would not be surprised if he ends up being a 90 percentile defensive tackle in his career, but he might be forced. That might be forcing it because of his production traits. And then on top of that, when you look at his other production traits, so taking a look at forced fumble market share, pass deflection market share, and interception market share, Murphy did well in terms of interceptions, but forced fumbles and pass deflections, he was not really as active or as good in terms of those particular areas. So again, Murphy again is not really producing like a top 16 pick typically produces at the college level. Now he does have really good athleticism traits. He had 91 percentile in terms of explosiveness, 94 percentile in terms of speed, and then 91.67 in terms of flexibility or change of direction ability in terms of his athleticism traits, which is great. These are pick 16 level athleticism. So he does have traits of a top 16 pick based on his athleticism traits. And when you look at his adjusted production, he does have a good age score. His MSA rating is better than his pass rating. The pass rating takes a look at or includes his, forced fumble data and his pass deflection data. So again, he has all the traits of a potential starting or better defensive tackle. It's just his solo tackle data is such that it's suspect. It puts him in a category where he's almost in between, say, Robert Kendiche and Chris Jones on the upper level. Chris Jones was a much more productive player at Mississippi State, but he also had about average solo tackle data. So he's kind of in between those two extremes, and I think he is going to turn out to be a decent overall pick. It's just that there's risk here. There is a potential that he may not work out the way you expect him to, and he's closer to, say, a 70 percentile prospect versus the 90 percentile prospect that you're expecting. So that's the first pick for the Seahawks. It's a little shaky. There are some positives here, but based on data, he is and would be considered a reach based on his historical data. Now, when you get to pick 81, they drafted Christian Haynes, offensive guard out of Connecticut. His data grade was 87.40 out of 100. His floor is 75.57. Balance grade is 81.49. And pick AV is 62.55 with an overall pick grade of a B. This was the first pick for them that was actually pretty decent value. When you look at his athleticism traits, he had a 94.79 explosion score and a 96 percentile speed score. So great athleticism traits, good overall ability as well in terms of his size and his physical metrics based on his data. So this is one of the first picks that actually is pretty decent for the Seahawks. Then, of course, you get to pick 118 and Tyrese Knight, linebacker out of UTEP. His data grade was 82.93. His floor is 49.53. Balance grade is 66.23. Pick AV is 63.32. And his overall pick grade would be a B. He is one of those prospects this year at the linebacker position that was very productive. When you look at his solo tackle data, his sack data, TFL data, all those marks were well within all pro potential levels when you look at the linebacker position. His adjusted production, or at least his extra market share production, in terms of pass deflections, interceptions, was also outstanding. So this is somebody who not only can impact the run, the quarterback, he can also impact the passing game, which is a really important factor to kind of think about when it comes to Knight. And then on top of that, when you look at athleticism traits, he was pretty decent as an athlete as well. Near elite speed, above average explosiveness, with a slightly above average flexibility or change of direction skills. So he doesn't quite have all the traits in terms of like elite athleticism traits, but he does have good enough athleticism to be considered somebody that could become a really good starter. And then when you get to his adjusted production, this is the only area where his data kind of lags a little bit, is when you take a look at his age, you take a look at his level of competition and his strength of schedule. So his pass score is better than his MSA rating, so his overall production collectively is much more impressive than just his sack TFL data, if you will, in terms of that position. But overall, I really like Tyrese Knight. I think he has a great shot to be a long-term starter. Despite the fact that most of that production was against lesser competition, I think this is one of those selections the Seahawks might be able to get a lot out of. And it would not surprise me if he had some Bobby Wagner-like vibes to him, because he is similar in terms of his production traits to a guy like Wagner, but not quite as athletic as Wagner was coming out of Utah State. Then, of course, you get to pick 1, 2, 1. AJ Barner, tight end out of Michigan. His data grade is 64.30. His floor is 37.91. Balance grade is 51.10 with a pick AV of 47.10. I would give this overall pick a D. When you look at his production traits, not that productive, but had good touchdown data. When you look at his other market share scores, he's pretty much average in terms of yards per reception and TD percentage. When you look at his athleticism traits, above average explosiveness, above average flexibility or change of direction ability, but below average speed. This is somebody who typically only becomes, say, a long-term starter. So that's kind of what you're looking at here. He doesn't have a whole lot of upside because of his athleticism. Then when you get to his adjusted production, good enough production and age profile to be a starter. That's what you should really be looking at him as, a sort of like a long-term starter type, but not somebody who could be a transcendent tight end because he lacks that athleticism to do that. Then, of course, you get to pick 136 and Nehemiah Pritchett, cornerback out of Auburn. 53.99 in terms of his data grade, 41.89 in terms of his floor, 47.94 in terms of balanced grade, and then pick AV is 48.26. Overall grade for him would be a F. Taking a look at his data, he had really good pass deflection data with below average solo tackle and interception data. When you look at his athleticism traits, really good speed score, with below average explosiveness and average flexibility for his size. So again, not the best athlete all around, but definitely had really good speed. And then when you look at his pass score or adjusted production, this looks at his strength of schedule, strength of team, all that kind of stuff. Below average in terms of that particular area for him as well. So Nehemiah overall would be kind of an F grade. He does have some good traits in terms of speed, but the rest of his profile doesn't quite live up to expectations. Then, of course, you get to pick 179 in Lumia, offensive guard out of Utah. His data grade is 86.55. His floor is 47.28 with a balance grade of 66.91. Overall pick AV here is 43.24. Overall pick grade would be a B. Taking a look at his athleticism traits, really good speed, near elite speed score for him, 57 percentile in terms of explosiveness. Don't really have a short shuttle or three cone to really project him more than this, but this is not a bad profile. This is a pretty decent profile overall for him when you look at his overall data. Then, of course, you get to pick 192 and DJ James, cornerback out of Auburn. His data grade is 47.17 out of 100. His floor is 27.62. Balance grade is 37.40 with a pick AV of 21.62 out of 100. Overall grade would be a F. Another DB that's kind of a F. When you take a look at his production traits, 80 percentile in terms of pass deflection data with below average solo tackle and interceptions. When you take a look at his athleticism traits, below average explosiveness, below average speed, and below average flexibility. So it's kind of like the opposite of Nehemiah Pritchett, because he doesn't have above average athleticism, but he does have above average speed relative to the rest of his data. So it's kind of interesting in terms of this guy. And then, of course, you get to adjusted production. He actually had better production for his age and everything compared to Pritchett. So, Nehemiah is a much better athlete, but not quite as productive. DJ James, much more productive, but not as great of an athlete. So, it's going to be interesting. This is going to be an interesting camp battle, to say the least, to see if they can, take that spot from Rick Woolen. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see what happens here. And then, of course, the last pick for them is pick 207 and Michael Jarrell, offensive tackle out of Findlay. He had a data grade of 78.89. His floor is 42.98. Balance grade is 60.94. Pick AV of 13.90. And overall pick grade would be a C. Taking a look at his athleticism traits, 93.81 in terms of explosiveness with near elite speed for his size. These are great athleticism traits for the position and somebody that I think was an overall good pick. But this concludes my overall look at the Seattle Seahawks in terms of their data. My final grade for them would probably be a C, a low C. I think they got some decent players here and there, but I think they also had some massive reaches as well. Byron Murphy II is somebody that does have the potential, based on his age and based on his athleticism, to be a very good football player. It's just he's not quite there yet in terms of what he actually did at Texas based on his overall production traits. So I'll be excited to see what happens with this class. I think it's a pretty solid all around class when you look at it. There were some picks here and there that weren't the best, which is why they graded lower. But this is it's an okay class. Again, it's not the best, not the worst, but it just is what it is. It's a decent all around class. So with all this stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. You can check out my other work at patreon.com/jcoburn. Also check out my Twitter, formerly or X, formerly known as Twitter account at Geometrics. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.